The burnt egg roll?
Yeah, you ever do oil or dabs or anything like that? These cartridges?
Yeah, actually, I have some over here to my right. They're cool. The hype kind of died out a little bit when there was that scandal in Wisconsin and some other cities. Do you remember that? There was people getting like, I guess, poisoning, some kind of vape poisoning, they said, because that was caused by vitamin E. And
oh yeah, I did hear about that whole vitamin E thing. It was a big deal out here in Portland. I think a lot of the ones that were getting sold like that were coming from here in Portland, from someplace in Portland. But I was in State Park one time in Collinsville, like when I was like 16, and there was a guy spraying like shit on the weed that he would say like got you more high. And I was like, damn, I've been smoking this dude's weed and he's been spraying it with just some like bug spray or whatever. And so I've always just kind of assumed, who knows what's going on, like with it all. That is one thing when I was in that weed industry, and like they tried to really clean it up and everything has to be tested, and it's like it's never as clean as like you think it is. There's always probably something going on and people got less of an idea. Everybody's human that's in the industry. Like if they can cut a corner, they will cut a corner, and you know, if they can get away with it, they will, and everybody's going to try every little loophole they have. But I've never minded it. But with those dabs, like in 2011, when I first got out to Portland, nobody had ever even heard of dabs. And I lived in this house. There was just like all these growers. There's probably like 8 people living at the house. The guy renting it all out was living in a tent in the backyard, where it's like weird Portland style setup. But one of the roommates that came in was these 2 young kids, this couple, this guy and a girl, and he was all about like extractions. And he's like, yeah, he'd get like these turkey basters and throw weed in there and start throwing butane in it. And he's like, so you're extracting all the bullshit out of it and just the THC? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's weird. And we do like these knife hits, and like on one of the first rounds of money I got when I got out here in Portland, he was like, yeah, if we could get this machine, it's called like a Temisium, and it's a closed loop system. I won't have to do it out of turkey basters anymore. And we'll be like one of the only people in the country, like with this setup, you know, it'll be legit. Like this is going to be big. And so I bought him that Temisium, and yeah, he started cooking that oil like crazy, just throwing all the trim and everything into that machine, and he started pumping out oil. And nobody had heard about oil back then. Whereas like a year into us already doing oil, High Times came out with their cover said like Dabs Explained, the future of marijuana or something. And it's like, oh, we're ahead of High Times. We've been doing that shit where nobody had even heard about it. And that was like the fun times where it was unregulated. Like if you work at a dispensary now, it's kind of like working at a gas station or something. Like it's just you bring it up and you hand the people the change, and that's about it. You know, you're around weed. But like when I worked at dispensaries, like you would be getting high at the counter with the people. Like it was just lawless. Like every day I was just thinking, I'm like, are we allowed to be doing this? And I don't think we really were. Like I think it was just a gray area that nobody gave a fuck about. But like the dispensary I worked at was one of 3.
I was going to ask you, do you think that over time, when new industries come up, new regulations is just a natural progression?
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's strategic too. Like the people who write these laws work for these companies, like they're literal lobbyists for these people, and they write the laws. Like they'll write businesses like I had out of business. They'll just make the rules so strict where it's like, oh, we're going to clean out 90% of our competition just with this law that I'm helping write because I'm on the board of, you know, the Oregon OLCC. So I get to write the laws, and it's like, well, that's crooked as fuck. Like you shouldn't be able to do that. And it's like, yeah, this is the business world, dummy. Like all you little hippie stoners think you got a thing going on out here. You just did the groundwork for us. And now Wall Street comes in and they would just write us out. We had one of the first extraction companies in Portland. I think I filed for the LLC in like 2012 or 13. Lifted Labs, you know, doing dabs with Lifted Labs. That was our shit. And like we were one of the only ones out there. And then like a year later, all the big companies came in and like they wrote the laws to put people like us out of business. So we ended up going out of business, but it was a fun ride. Like we were doing shit nobody else was doing. Like Vice magazine actually like sent me a thing on our Facebook page, like in the messages. I didn't even get it till like 3 years later. I'm like, fuck, Vice was trying to get a hold of us. And they were like, yeah, we were just trying to talk to extractors in the community. You know, we probably wouldn't have talked to them anyways though, because everything we were doing was kind of illegal. Like they just gave you a little gray area to play in. And it was like, yeah, you're probably going to have to be more on the black, you know, than the gray or the white to just get by. Everything's federally illegal. They make it really hard to do things by the book. And the only people involved in the industry back then were just like the criminal minded people who are willing to take that risk of like, yeah, I've been doing it illegally my whole life. I'll do it half legal now.
Are you still in the industry currently, or you're mainly focused on, I think you said you were into dog training now, right?
Yeah, I've been a dog trainer now for like 5 years. So 2016 was when like I pretty much got out for good. So from 2009 to 2016, so it was like 7 years like full time in it. And by the time 2016 rolled around, that's when it became more legitimate, you know, dispensaries everywhere, people are paying taxes and all that. And I kind of rode that wave a little bit when all the laws were changing and things were getting more legitimate. I was working security. We had already kind of been run out of the extraction world. So I was doing security for the people who ran us out of business, you know, like all those big companies we were doing security for. And they were playing around in the black to area too, where they weren't doing things out because you couldn't, it was too hard. But like, you know, these big companies, it was wild. Like we were security guys and we have like this little van and it was all these ex-Marines and like some hardcore like military people with resumes that were like pretty legitimate. And I was like the weakest resume on there, and a paratrooper is usually something that holds a little weight. So we had like a legit group of guys who just got done fighting in Afghanistan, and the cartel was jacking a lot of these growers all the time.
That reminds me of that movie Den of Thieves. You seen that movie?
There's like some movie about it, like Oliver Stone did it. I forget what it was.
Was it Dead Presidents?
No, that was before its time. It was like called Savages or something like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
That was about like dudes in that industry. Have you ever seen the show Murder Mountain on Netflix? You should watch that.
Yeah. I've heard of it, but I didn't watch it yet.
Of what was going on in the weed world, like around 2009 to 11, when it was only criminals, you know, where every time I kind of got my inside peek in Denver, it was like the Russian mob like had a lot to do with it. I was at a dispensary once when they're closing, and all these dudes in suits and like track suits walk in, like all speaking Russian, talking on their phones with their big pinky rings, and they all walk in the back like room like while they're closing up. And I'm like, oh, well, this is pretty shady. And when I got out here, it was like all these Cambodian gangster dudes like running everything. That's who ran like the first dispensary I had. And my friend from the army who I moved out here with, he could be like an extra on Sons of Anarchy. He looks like just a big biker dude. So he got our foot in the door when we moved out here, but he looks like he could be on that show. And so they hired him because it was like, oh, you're security and you can be a bud tender. So he got us the foot in the door. And this is it. There's only 3 dispensaries in Portland at the time, and all of them are kind of criminally run, where it's like, where's this money coming from? There's just huge, there's like literally people are throwing money through the money machines. You're smoking weed at the counters, like doing dabs at the counters with the customers. Like everybody's got guns on them. Like there's guns everywhere. And it was just like weird. And he ended up getting a wolf, and like a half wolf, half dog. And that wolf would just like wander. Like if you looked at it, you're like, that's a wolf. Like you didn't see any dog in it. And it's just wandering around the dispensary. He had this huge warehouse that was like a dispensary and a grow operation, just with way more plants than like you were supposed to have. And yeah, there's just this wolf wandering around it. And it was like, is this real? Like what's going on? There's like all these Cambodian dudes like throwing money in the money machine. And
here's a weed movie that I think you probably might have seen, Kid Cannabis.
Once I got into the industry, like I didn't even like watching all that, where it's like, oh, this is corny as fuck. It's like being in the army, watching some army movie. You're like, that's not how it is. That's Hollywood's version of how it is. And I had seen a couple like weed movies where I'm like, this is dumb. Like, I don't want to watch this. You're ruining it.
I agree. There are movies like, or once you're in an industry, like and you see the game for what it really is, and then you see a movie, you're like, man, that shit is not real.
Yeah, no, it's like kind of real with this goofy spin. It's like they put this spin on it, and it's like, oh, whether you're trying to dramatize it or whatever you're trying to do, I see this, and this isn't like what it's really like at all. And yeah, I guess that's Hollywood. That's that magic wand they got down there, you know, to just make it look like this, more glamorous, romanticize this. Every like thing that the rap industry, like that Hollywood tried to do, anytime I was there, I would always think this is way less glamorous and way more just grimy than they make it look on TV. Like when you're in an actual like crack house or something in East St. Louis, you're not like, oh, this is kind of cool and like being dangerous. You're like, this is sad, like, and just dirty and grimy. And same thing with like a dispensary, how if they try to put a spin on it and it's like, no, you'll never know like how it was back in the old days. And it'll never be like that again. So like when Illinois went legal, like they went legal with the rules and the players already in place. Like out here, it was a bunch of hippies just doing it and getting laws passed. And, you know, like we did the groundwork of, you know, took the risk of, we're not supposed to be doing this. Like those big Wall Street companies, when we were doing security later on, they would literally give us like $750,000 cash. They're like, here's $750,000. Take this to Southern Oregon and you're going to get like 800 pounds or whatever it is, like tonnage, you know, like, and you're going to bring it back and that's going to get extracted into all these vape cartridges, you know, that have such a high demand. How do you expect to make, is a business going to do this if you play by the rules? So they kind of almost needed people like us to do that to make their business go. And everything was all cash back then. But yeah, they just give you these giant amounts of money. And like me and this Marine would be driving down there and he'd be like, man, we could go to Mexico right now and nobody would ever hear from us again. He's like, I could make a call to like 10 people and we could like own a town with this much money in like a couple weeks. We could go in and just take over a town. And yeah, it was just weird times. So like we drive down to Southern Oregon, down in like Medford, and you just be in the middle of nowhere on like these huge weed farms in the middle of nowhere, back roads, like into a creepy garage that you got to back into. Everybody's got guns, but everybody was cool. It'd be like, yo, you want to do a dab? You know, and like dogs everywhere and just grow weed everywhere. And then, yeah, we'd take all that weed right back up to Portland and we'd just go back and forth, like running that train for them. We'd have all these, you know, medical cards that were good for probably like a quarter of the amount of weed we were supposed to have. So we were kind of trying to be legal, but it was pretty illegal. But to go back to the Cambodian dude who had the wolf, that's like how it all kind of played out. And that's how synchronicity always kept popping up, because the first time I ever did DMT on my birthday with the Mayans and all that, the Mayan calendar, that was at that warehouse that he had. Like that was our clubhouse. Like and I'd do all these overnight shifts. We'd all take turns on somebody's got to guard like all this weed downstairs, and we'd all take turns, and it was my night shift on my birthday. Well, anyways, if you fast forward to 2015, it was the last time I've ever done DMT. And when I did it, it was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. That was my last time. And I went to that same warehouse to get some free birthday dabs because that same dude who was doing extractions worked there. And they're like, that wolf puppy, Kiska, she had puppies last night. And I'm like, oh, for real, on my birthday? And they're like, yeah, she had them right after midnight. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. They were born on my birthday. And I was like, I was in like the spirit world when they were being born. Like I was going out and they were coming in at the same time. They were born on my birthday, huh? I was like, yeah, I want one of those dogs, even though I had no business having a dog. Like at the time, you know, we had our hands full as it was, much less getting a dog. And I was only supposed to get one, and he had two of them. And he was like, do you want this other one? He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this one. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to it if you keep it. So I was like, yeah, I'll take it. So I ended up getting these two dogs. And if you fast forward like a couple months later, I'm like, fuck, these dogs are going to kill me and like eat my house in the process. These are little monsters. I have to get these things trained. And while I was looking for training, I couldn't find any training. It was all too expensive, but I saw a few dog trainer ads and I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Cause I kind of knew my time in the weed industry was about up. Like there wasn't much left for me. My original goal in the weed industry when I first got out there, I'm like, man, this is all just criminal stoners. I was like, somebody needs to get an education and come in here with a degree and they would run shit. So I had the GI Bill. I was going to school. So the goal was just to get my MBA and take over the weed business. It was the plan. I'm going to be a weed mogul, get my MBA, be the only person with an MBA whose only business he's worked in is weed. You know, like I'll have this weird perspective on it. And yeah, I was in graduate school and it was like, nobody cares. This isn't going to do anything. The people that were giving us all that money driving down to Southern Oregon, like the guy who was their chief financial officer was like a chief executive at Nestle before that, and he had a Harvard MBA. And I'm like, oh, well, nobody gives a fuck about my stupid MBA. They'll eat me alive, you know. So I knew I was kind of had to get out of the weed business anyways. And I was like, well, dog trainer, that'd be cool. I live on this 18-acre farm. I'm like, I got the spot for it, like to have dogs, and I can at least learn how to train these two in the process. And that's how it all changed. But it all started with that synchronicity of, oh, they happen to be born on my birthday in that same building that I first did DMT on, you know, and is where they were born. And then I was on DMT while they were born. So it was like, oh yeah, here's one of these divine signs again. I'm going to get one of these dogs. And next thing you know, I'm a dog trainer. And that's how I feed my family. Like I have my own dog training business. And that's been a whole wild ride in itself too. But it's all been inspired by these like weird coincidences. It's like, oh, it's just a coincidence that wolf had those puppies on your birthday. And it was like, yeah, is it? Or is it like some weird matrix thing going on? I don't know what it is, but it can't be just random coincidence.
It's Jay-Z 444.
Yeah, right. That's the other thing. Jay-Z, he always says, or he said in that one rap song that stayed with me forever, but he's like, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see. And it's like, if I go into life thinking that, the only people who could convince me otherwise, or I would have to listen to them, because if it's only by my eyes through my experience, something's going on here. Like there's a whole game being played. And if you go into that spirit realm with the DMT entities, it's like, oh yeah, this is nothing what we're doing here. This is just one lens. There's a whole bunch of other lenses you can see. There's so many frequencies. We're stuck on 105.7, but there's a whole AM, FM thing out there. You're on one, but you can go all over the place. And this is way crazier than science tries to make it sound, you know, like of the Big Bang or whatever it is. It's like, I don't know. You're telling me all this is coincidence? I'd have a hard time believing it. But yeah, no, it's been a wild ride with the weed business and how it all tied in like that.
I agree. To really think that everything we see is real, you got to be crazy, man. There's so many different possibilities, and I sometimes question like how much of what we see is socially engineered by people with money.
Yeah, man, like as a dog trainer, all I do is condition dogs every day, like classical conditioning in the psychology world, where it's like, yeah, I'm the one like doing the experiments that they did a long time ago to get you to buy their shit. The whole reason they did these experiments a long time ago is to wind your brain up to do exactly what they want. Everybody's dancing to the beat that they put down, you know, and you think you're being independent. And it's like, yeah, that thought was put in your head a long time ago. And you can see it in action with dogs, where it's just like, oh, this is like the blunt version of, you know, marketing and like persuasion and all these things they do. That's what I was getting my MBA in, was like marketing, because it always like interested me how they could play with your mind, where I like heard that most restaurants have red and yellow as like their colors because those color combinations make you hungry, and they know how to like fuck with your mind, and they can get physical results through like these persuasion techniques. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to learn that shit. And then when that didn't work out, like doing marketing or business or anything, doing it with dogs, it's like, oh, well, this is its own version of that, of how do you control something, you know, without just force? How do you get them to want to do it on their own? How do you get them to ask to do the thing you wanted them to do anyways? You know, how do you get them to beg for it? And it's like, yeah, it's all that same, you know, mentality and all those same things of once you know how the brain works, you can kind of start playing with it a little bit better.
Yeah, man. Real quick, your bong like is in the camera.
Oh,
it's all good. I don't care if it's there.
I'm in the little thing up in the corner. I can barely see it.
Yeah, no, I don't care if it's there, but the fucking YouTube Nazis might take it down.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. It's like Joe Rogan gets stoned on his thing, but but he's got privilege on his, because he talks about shit that you probably couldn't talk about too.
I don't know. We're about to find out, unless there's anything you've said that you don't want me to post.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I don't think
I feel like you dropped
I think a statute of limitations is already up, and all that shit that I did that was illegal in the old days, it's like I'm not really about that life anymore. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a father. Like I run a business. It's a different world. Yeah, it's fun to talk about those old times, and I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for those times.
Yeah. No, because I think you dropped a lot of real shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it was an interesting perspective of like somebody told me once, like, they're like, you're like Forrest Gump. You know, you just end up in all these weird spots in American history. Like 9/11 happens. I'm like in the army right after that. You know, the weed world, you know, happens. I'm like involved in all that. There's just been a bunch of like weird little things. Joe Rogan, you know, I know you were saying you listened to him, where I was on him at the very beginning. I don't really listen to him too much anymore. It's kind of like Nelly. It's like when I only knew about Nelly or a rapper, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Now that the whole world knows about him, it's like, oh, this is pop. Like
that's funny you say that, because I'm kind of the same way with Joe Rogan now too, a little bit. Because this is my thought on why I kind of don't listen to him as much, is because I feel like he's gotten too political.
Yep. Yeah, no, he's an influencer now. Like when I first started listening to him in 2009, it seemed more genuine, where now it's like, oh, he knows he's got influence, and I can kind of see him wielding it. And I don't like getting mind fucked by people like telling me to do something that they're just fucking with me, you know, because he kind of played a big role of everything I've got into, from like martial arts to float tanks to kale shakes in my Vitamix, you know, like hot yoga. I had done all these things at DMT that I never even would have heard of. Like one of the dogs I trained is like my celebrity dog or whatever was this guy, Colin O'Brady. I heard about him on a Joe Rogan podcast. He was one of the guests. And then I followed him on there, and he got a dog. And I'm like, yo, I'll train your dog. And he said, yeah. But it's like all that happened because Joe Rogan, I met him too and hung out with him. This one night he came to Portland, and we went to the comedy show that he did, him and Tony Hinchcliffe. And he like closed the bar down. Afterwards, he took a picture with everybody. And it was like me, my wife, him, and like 4 other people just sitting at the bar for like an hour, just drinking and bullshitting and like asking him questions. And
honest opinion, because I've always wanted to talk to Joe Rogan. He inspired me to do a podcast. But since you've hung out with him, what is your honest opinion? Do you feel like he's real, or you feel like he's fake?
Probably 50-50. He seemed just really like smart though. Like he was on it. Like you could tell his brain fires like way smarter and faster than like mine and everybody in that little circles did, you know, and you could tell he could jujitsu his way out of any conversation, you know. So it was kind of just an extension of the podcast, because everybody was asking like questions that he'd said on the podcast a million times, and it would be dumb questions, but you could just tell he was on another thing. But he was really nice, you know. I had nothing bad to say. He was really nice. He was cool and like funny, but you could tell he was just on a different level. And you could tell he had done this a million times, and he was probably just on autopilot, and he'd probably said these things a million times. And yeah, like he probably wouldn't, you know, remember me or anything like that, like obviously. But by the time he got back to the hotel, he probably forgot like the entire hour we just hung out together.
Unless we make this a video clip on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, and he's like, oh shit, I remember that guy. He showed me his fucked up leg. He's got a big scar on his leg.
And we do some clickbait, and we're like the truth about Joe Rogan.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you could get some viewers like that. It'd be a big disappointment though. I'd let everybody down. They're like, oh, 50-50, you don't know. I wish I had a better answer for it that would make for a better piece you could put out there, because it was weird though, just being able to hang out with them, where he's like one that I had listened to so much at the beginning, and he kind of played a role, and it's like, oh, there he is right there, way shorter than I thought he would be, but friendly and nice. Where again, that was kind of the old school days, where now I don't think he even takes pictures and hangs out. I think he does more like stadiums and shit compared to like little comedy clubs. Yeah, it was a fun night.
I don't know if you watch other YouTube political influencers on YouTube.
Yeah, here and there. I keep up with who people are. YouTube's where most of my entertainment comes from, though. Like all the media I take in is usually YouTube videos. I walk 10 miles a day just around and around with dogs, and I usually just have a YouTube video going. And yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most people, not all of them, but
yeah. Are there any particular ones that you like?
yeah, I mean, the ones I listen to are probably nobody's even ever heard of, or anything. But yeah, I got the ones like I roll real hard on where it's like, yeah, I go on this guy's thing, but everybody would just think they're crazy, where it's like I've always been kind of a different breed, like than the mainstream, how everybody goes. I kind of never even wanted to be on the same beat as the rest of the world. And yeah, so if people listen, they'd be like, oh, you believe all this shit? Or you listen to that type of stuff? I've always been like on the conspiracy tip for like a long time. Like that's been a weird like thing in my life, how that's played out, like, but just conspiracy minded. Like, so now in the world, it used to be cool to be a conspiracy theorist back in the old days. Since like Corona happened, you don't even want to be a conspiracy person. Like people like look at you a little bit different. It got a little bit more serious in it where it's like, oh, you listen to that guy or you listen to this person, you believe that. And it's like, I don't know, like who do you listen to? CNN or fucking Joe Rogan or whoever, like these big names, like who they for sure know how to, put you in the mindset and sell get you to buy what they're selling, and they're really good at that. And when you see somebody who's good at talking and that verbal jujitsu and judo and how to set things up and they go with it, it's like, yeah, they know what they're doing and it's a skill. It's like basketball. It'd be like me playing basketball against a good basketball player. They'd run circles around me, and it's like, oh yeah, you're good. That's kind of what it was like trying to talk to Joe Rogan. I wasn't trying to quiz him or anything, but you could just tell he's getting a million questions out of every angle, and he was just on it. And it's like, oh, what are you up to? How did you? And I guess it's practice. He's a professional talker, but it was noticeably better he was than everybody else.
I kind of like that shit though, man. Like I kind of want to do some like mental jiu-jitsu with some of these people. We all have our own particular ideas, right, of how things should be, and then sometimes when we watch these other people we get influenced by them. So I think it would be kind of fun or interesting to like debate or talk and then just share thoughts, kind of like what me and you are doing right now.
Yeah, but even like talking with you, I can tell you talk into a microphone way more than me, where I've always been somebody who's had like a million words to say at once, and like how does it come out, and I'm like all over the place, where it's like, yeah, I don't belong on mainstream platforms, because I've even thought about that with dog training, where it's like, oh, I could put out some videos and do this or that. It's all too much. You can tell that's a couple levels up than what I do. I'm just a stoner who, says a bunch and gets caught up in his words, and I don't know how to direct the whole thing, where I could tell just listening to your other podcasts. It's like, oh, that you're good at this, being an interviewer, where it's like my shit goes off the rails all the time. I can start rambling about something forever and everybody's just like, shut the fuck up already. And I don't really blame them. Like if I heard it, I'd be like, yeah.
I think you've been doing good, man, because a lot of what you're saying is your own experiences. I could tell it's from the heart, But
like I said, if I wanted to like do a podcast with Joe Rogan or something, where I had thought about being like, hey, come interview a dog trainer, how do I get with him? I've always been kind of good at getting with these celebrities, like type thing, on not huge ones, but if they're around, how can I train his dog? How can I get in with this guy? Kind of thinking out of the box on how to network and like do stuff like that. And it's like, I don't even think I want to. Like I would make myself look stupid, in front of the world, where I'm better off just I live on a farm all by myself. I don't really have neighbors or anything else, where it's like, yeah, I belong in this little pocket, like down here, this little hermit life of nobody wants to hear what I have to say anyways.
But see, that's where I think we disagree, because I think you have an interesting story that a lot of people would like to hear.
Yeah, but you never know. And it can be, there's a lot of funny times, and I've listened to a bunch of dumb shit on YouTube before, where I've listened to all sorts of hours and hours of like, oh, I'll never get that part of my life back. So now here I am just adding to all that. But I don't think you can go wrong. I think this will probably be the future of media, like the way the whole thing's going, how it was when we were kids, where I think it'll probably be more smaller podcast niches, like, and stuff like that. Cause that's how I do. It's like just little people probably nobody's even ever heard of that. They don't even have that many fans, but like the fans are loyal. And I think it'll probably just keep breaking up like that. You'll just ride with your little groups. That's not a bad thing. I'm interested to see what life will be like in 15, 20 years. I think it'll be pretty wild. We're already getting pretty old. And it's like, oh, we'll be old men, in 20 years from now. And I bet the world's going to be a different spot.
I think it never changes, right? The things that go on, it's all a big circle, right? And a lot of times you see people that start off like very liberal, right? When we're younger, we tend to start off more liberal, right? But then as time goes by, like I've seen a lot of liberals become conservatives over time.
What's that saying? It's like, show me a young man who's a conservative and I'll show you a man with no heart. Show me old man that's a liberal and I'll show you a man with no brain, where it's like, yeah, you're more empathetic and emotional and like, I want to help the world and save the world and all that as you're younger. And kind of like that Portland thing where 10 years ago, I probably would have been helping cause chaos because I was all about chaos and anarchy and like all that, where I'm like, yeah, I'll be part of the problem. And now as like a small business owner, I'm like, oh, those fucking monsters ruined all these like small businesses, where it's like just a flip side. But I'm not a liberal or conservative. I've always hated politics. It's always been, the douche versus the turd sandwich is like what South Park says. Like that's how I've always been so confused on how people get caught up in this and like this guy's good. And it's like, no, they're all pieces of shit, man. They're all master wizard players of this game of, vote for me, here's why. And they're all shady. I always thought it was common sense that like lawyers and politicians are kind of shady, like that's what all the jokes and stuff are about. And it's like, oh, these are a bunch of lawyers and politicians telling you what to do. And like, you just go along with it and that they're crooked, a lot of times they're like caught being crooked and nobody even cares or whatever. And it's like, how do you guys fall for this? How would you ride so hard on that team? But I've been a, fan of teams before where it's like 06 World Series for the Cardinals. I was like, yeah, go Cardinals and fuck the Tigers or whatever. So I guess, but that's what it reminds me of is kind of like some sports rivalry everybody takes way too serious. And I don't even like the sport that they're talking about. It's like, I could care less. It's like them talking about soccer. And it's like, I don't even know these teams. I don't want to know these teams. I don't even like the game that much. And that's how it is with politics.
I agree, man. 100%, man. I feel everything that you just said is the truth, in a nutshell. I saw one of your posts on your Instagram about George Carlin when he was doing his stand-up and he was talking about politicians. I was like, man, that's the motherfucking truth right there.
Yeah, he spit a lot of truth. Like a lot of his like most famous things that everybody loved is going on right now and nobody like puts it together. I'm like, oh shit, we're living like the butt of George Carlin's joke right now, and we don't even realize it. But they'll like also say that's like one of their top comedy albums they've ever heard. They're like, oh, that's genius. And then they'll go live like the butt of the joke where it's like, yeah, you're living how he was making fun of. Like you're voting for these people. But yeah, what he was saying was how he doesn't vote. And it's like, yeah, I don't vote for that exact reason of what he says. He's like, it's your problem. They say if you vote, you have no right to complain. He's like, it's the opposite. He's like, you have no right to complain if you voted for this shit. I didn't vote for this. I'll sit here and complain all day. This is your fucking system you people put together. And it's true. It's like, I didn't have anything to do with this. And if I did, you guys would all vote against it anyways, and it wouldn't be real. Like, so fuck it. Like it's a game that doesn't care about me. So why would I care about it? I just need to know the outline of the rules so I don't go to jail because the game like has life consequences attached to it.
That's the realest shit I ever heard in my life, man.
No, it is though. Yeah. And it's all just so dumb. I can't believe how everybody like plays along with it. It didn't seem like everybody was so down on politics when I was like a kid. It was never like, fuck Bob Dole, or like whoever. It was more just like what boring, nerdy people talked about and everybody else. Where now everybody, it's all anybody talks about. And it's like the WWF and they all take it real. It's like, no, the Undertaker's gonna beat this, whoever on Sunday. And if you think fucking Shawn Michaels is gonna beat the Undertaker, fuck you, delete me as a friend. I want nothing to do with this. And it's like, this is fake, right? And it's like, it's not. And I know people say, no, there's a lot going on. And it's like, trust me, these people don't give a fuck about you. Like if you're in the army, you'll learn real fast that nobody in the government gives a fuck about you. They're disposable. They look at you like they look at like machinery. You're just a general purpose piece of the machine going on right now, and they don't care about you. And they'll tell you all this shit and make you mad and want to cry and like feel bad, but they don't care. And that's why shit never even gets better. Yeah. I've seen so much crooked politics in my life. Do you remember when we were kids and the Casino Queen came to East St. Louis? I remember always seeing on the news them being like, we're going to give all this money to East St. Louis School District from the Casino Queen. That was like in 1992. It's like, how'd that work out? How'd like all that money work out? And that was a bunch of politicians like writing laws and signing stuff and everything else, making promises, and nothing positive like worked out at all. Even being in the weed business, where it's like I used to be outside of St. Louis courthouse, like on those hemp rallies and stuff, like back in the old days in like 2008 and stuff, I would have signs that said weed should be legal. And then when weed was legal, it's like, oh, well, those same crooked people came in and took advantage and ruined this industry too. It's not like how you would think it is if it's legal, where it's like, yeah, there's still a bunch of people going to jail for having weed and selling weed. And it's like, you didn't pay this much money. You didn't get this tested. There's all these rules to it. You're like, oh, it's not legal. It's legal for you rich people to keep doing like your same thing. And they never care about you, but they'll tell you they do to get your vote and to make this whole thing real, where it's like, yeah, it's two sides that don't care about you trying to spin their own thing. And it's still the WWF. And nobody will ever convince me different of that it's not, and that they do care about me.
Yeah. That's why I've been listening to a lot more Tupac these days, because he spoke the truth, man. Yeah, no, he was, definitely a revolutionary mindset. And there's a bunch of like old revolutionary people that I didn't even get that message. Like when I was listening to it the first time, I was just kind of bobbing my head, singing along mindlessly, but then when you go back and kind of dissect it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, he knew what he was talking about. There's a bunch of that, though, of like shit I used to listen to or watch that it's like, oh, people have been hip to this for a long time. And this is what they were talking about with this. And yeah, I still don't understand how everybody like can know that, though, and still be like, well, Biden will fix this or Trump's going to fix this. It's like, oh, well, you missed the point, like to the whole thing. Like you're like, Tupac matters, like vote Biden or whatever, like because Tupac was speaking truth. It's like, no, that's not like gonna help anything. We're gonna go in the same circle over and over. But again, what do I know? I'm just some guy without neighbors. Like I'm with dogs 90% of my life. I rarely even interact with like people. I do lessons like with clients and go to the grocery store and shit, but it's mostly just my kids and my wife, and I got like 8 to 10 dogs on my property at any given time. So it's like I live it from a different perspective. So I wouldn't expect for everybody to be like, I would expect them to say, yo, this guy is a fucking idiot. Like where it's like, yeah, I don't disagree. If I didn't do the shit I did, I would probably hear me talk and be like, yeah, that's an idiot. I have a different perspective working with dogs, mostly high all the fucking time for all these years. My job's just smoke weed and listen to YouTube and walk around, go to the park, walk around my farm. I live on this big farm. I just walk around that and hang out with dogs. I just had deja vu that me and you were talking about stuff like this before in the past.
Yeah, me and you, young revolutionaries in 6th grade at your parents' house in the basement talking about something like this.
Yeah, man, maybe so, right? In a different lifetime, ages ago, right? Many moons ago.
Oh yeah, it could be. Because it's that, you ever look into like genetic memory? It's all pretty interesting, but like, so they prove like with mice or whatever, they would like shock a mouse every time it smelled the orange scent. And then like they would do that for X amount of generations. And after like a few generations, its stress level, they could measure it, would still go up just from the orange without the shock. So it's like, oh, these genetics were passed down. That's why the chicken's like afraid of the hawk, like fresh out of the egg. It's just that genetic memory. And once you kind of understand all that, where it's like, I almost wonder if like past lives are, they say there's been like 1 million people who had to live. Like, because if you have 4 grandparents and they all have 4 grandparents, it's like this mathematical equation that a lot of people had to be around for you to come around. And it's like, yeah, there's been like 1 million people from whenever to you, you know, and it's like, were those past lives? Did our ancestors kick it? And like, you're just reading little parts of that, or was it legitimate past lives with the soul coming in? Because I'm open to all that. Even like the Bible talks about past lives and like reincarnation. Like they thought John the Baptist was reincarnated of Elisha. Like, so it's there, you know, where it's mentioned, and it's like, yeah, could be. I have no idea. But like that genetic memory, when I was trying to do my MBA in college, like that was like one of my dissertations was the red and yellow colors that make you hungry and like how colors affect your buying patterns. And I thought genetic memory. I'm like, well, red and yellow is just tripping off these flesh and blood, you know, that ancestors have been eating forever. Flesh and blood are those colors, and that's why it makes you hungry. And that's why McDonald's and Taco Bell and everybody have that as their logo. And it was like, why does open signs are always red around it, you know, like
you just mentioned something about flesh and blood, so I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on like QAnon and their shit about like the human traffickers and eating like young children's flesh and blood to get that adrenochrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything's possible. I would be more likely to think that, not like QAnon's real. They all call them like QBs in the conspiracy world. That is just a bunch of conservative people who are jumping into this conspiracy world. That it's just like the weed thing. It's like all these people are coming in, ruining everything. We put in all the groundwork, these truther channels from the old days, and now they're all on some weird shit. But yeah, I've always thought, somebody like mentioned how many kids go missing every year, like, and all that. And like the numbers don't add up, or like something's going on. And nothing would surprise me. I mean, if it wasn't happening, like if Jeffrey Epstein, it's like, no, this wasn't some big string of things. But man, you could look at certain things like the Lincoln scandal, I think it was called, in Nebraska in the 80s, was like congressmen and judges like who had access to all these boys' homes, you know, like orphanages, like with little kids that they were pimping out and do experiments on. And that Penn State, Sandusky or whatever, like there's real examples of real shit going on. And it's like, you would think there'd probably be other shit going on besides what they tell you on the news, or that they just haven't uncovered yet. And there's probably like, they hint about it in like every movie and shit like that. Like they always hint about like, oh, there's this wild shit going on behind the scenes. And it's like, yeah, probably, like, why wouldn't there be? But I don't know. Do you remember in 8th grade in our confirmation class, Pastor Inkfer was the chaplain for Collinsville Police Department, and he was saying like that he was chaplain for Collinsville Police Department, the gates of hell back there on the back roads. He said there was like a bunch of animal sacrifices that happen out there, and he's like, the news made it sound like it was like high school metalheads, you know, like who were killing cats. He's like, but I went out there and it was like upside down cows gutted with like all sorts of ritualistically done. And it's, I remember thinking in 8th grade, it's like, who the fuck was doing that? Is there like some Satanist like doing some wild shit in this world? And it's like, yeah, probably, I would think so. Like Aleister Crowley and like all the people that follow him, like there was some weird shit going on. Like L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology is a real thing. And it's like, people know how to mess with the mind and like the little hacks of life, you know, of like, oh, you don't know this, but I do. And I'm going to manipulate you through this, you know, and they like that control. And even if there is no Satan or anything, it's just Satanists to like do that, to dominate everything. You know, this is mine, fuck you. It's like, yeah, that represents like Satanism to begin with, right? Like the whole essence of what that is. But yeah, I think there's probably some wild shit going on in this world. If it wasn't though, I wouldn't be like, I'd be happy. I wouldn't be like one of these disappointed people if they're like, yeah, QAnon, I do think's like a whole, they're getting played, you know, like they're getting played by all the same people who play everything. It's just another genre of how we can play you. And I think it's like other side of like the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, is like more liberal, and like the QAnons, like these conspiracy people. And it's like, we know how to talk to you. We know what words you like, you know, like, we'll say these words and you're just gonna like us and kind of ride with us, even though we don't. Q's probably like AI or not even real. I don't even know what it is. I didn't really follow it that much.
Yeah, that's like what my lawyer friend was telling me. He said, how much of what Donald Trump is tweeting is even real? Do we think it's him doing it, or
there's no picture of Donald Trump on an iPhone? Like there's no picture of him playing on it. And like his tweets are like, you know, sensation of the new world. Like they represent a monument of like the new world as his Twitter account. And there's no pictures like supposedly of him like on an iPhone playing on a phone. Like you've never even seen him do it, and believe none of what you hear and half of what you see, you know. And it's like, yeah, I bet there's a lot more going on. You ever see that movie Wag the Dog when we were kids?
No, I haven't seen that one.
It was like with Dustin Hoffman. I never really watched all of it. I watched it when I was a kid, but I didn't really get it. But I've seen like synopsises of it. But the whole thing's on. They're just doing, this is all just a big show. Like it's literally an orchestrated WWF. This is a fake war with actors, you know, like, and all this. Everything's like just a big, and it's like, I bet that's, you know, more likely than what CNN and Fox News is telling me to be true. You know, it's like, I know for sure they have a vested interest in mind fucking me and getting me to go around with it. It's the people trying to expose everything. They're just stoners like, what if everything was like fake, you know? And that's like some stoner talk for sure. And it's like, I've always vibed with that a little bit more. And I've always like just been grossed out by propaganda of Fox News and CNN, where it's like, they told us weapons of mass destruction came through, and like Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. I was in the army for all of that. And then it was like, oh, well, he never had them, and all that was just a big lie. They told me weed was like a drug. It's still a federal Schedule 1 narcotic, highly addictive, you know, like, and can kill you, is like what it's described as. And it's like, no, it's not. You were lying to me this whole fucking time. This whole thing was a big lie. The handful of things I can prove, like through my experience, turns out you were lying on. Like weed, my military experience, like all this, it was all based on lies. And it's like, so yeah, I assume everything the media is telling me has like a spin and an agenda to it, because why wouldn't it? Like they're always selling something and moving something one way. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah. How can people believe anything anymore, man? Even like what you were talking about earlier with Joe Rogan, you know, as an influencer, I feel like he kind of makes people lean one way, a certain way, not all the way, just enough, right?
No, he knows who he's talking to and like how to play to both sides. He pisses both sides off all the time, because everybody will be like, oh, why do you have all these conservative people on? But then he'll like have a liberal guy on and say all the right buzzwords that'll like make him cool on that side too, you know, where it's like, oh, he knows, he just plays back and forth. And he's a comedian too. Like he's probably having a good time out of all this, you know, of playing both sides and knowing how to kind of work the crowd. He's the one who like gave me the idea of, if I ever even talk about this shit, to just start it off with like, hey, I'm an idiot who knows nothing. He'd say, I'm a comedian, don't listen to me. And to just put off all the blame. He knows what he's doing. And it's not a bad strategy, because you're like, yeah, I'm the same way. Like, don't get mad at me or dislike all your video, you know, like all your views or whatever, because you don't agree with me. I don't expect you to agree with me. This is just some outside of the box perspective from like a view that the most people haven't done. Most people aren't dog trainers or in the weed world. Like most of their adult life, they've been doing jobs that nobody else has really done. It's like, yeah, it's just a different angle, and not everybody believes what Fox News and CNN says. I'm pretty much just right off the bat, if what they're saying, it's like, oh, well, there's a spin here. They're probably lying. Like there's no way this is 100% true right off the bat. Like no matter what's going on, it's like, I'll give them 50, maybe half of what they said is true, but for sure, at least 50% of spin with an agenda behind it. I just don't see how you don't see the WWF side to it and how you would get so mad over it. But there is shit too that I get mad on, like, you know, that it's like, I would defriend somebody if they like start talking too crazy of shit. And there are lines for people to be like, yeah, I don't agree with that. Like I got a bunch of people who are on that burn this fucking thing down, anarchy, tear it down. And it's like, yeah, as a small business owner, I'm not down for just burning it all down now. A lot of people worked really hard to get the things they have, and you just want to tear it all down because you don't agree with it, and you're not prepared for that life. If all this shit got tore down, you're just throwing a temper tantrum and you're not ready. You guys are all indoor cats who aren't ready for the outside world. You know, like, go fend for yourself. You need this system that you hate so much. You know, CNN needs Trump. That's where all their ratings come from, is like the other side. They need the other, you know, like everybody needs like the thing they hate. And if you take that away and we just go to the jungle, you know, and have to live in the jungle, yeah, good luck to you. You don't know what you're doing. I've practiced trying to know what I'm doing, and I don't think I would make it, you know, of whether it's gardening or farming or hunting or like survival skills and all that. And it's like, yeah, I don't think I would make it, much less somebody who like plays video games or whatever all day and is like, yeah, fuck the system, burn down all the courthouses.
You would have to find someone like Cameron Haynes. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, keep hammering. He was at that show I was at with Joe Rogan when he came to Portland, because he's out of Eugene, Oregon, and he came up to the show. He is all shredded up, like he had some big arms on him. That was all I remember about Cameron Haynes. But he was at that show in Portland I was at. Yeah,
my cousin, he likes Cameron Haynes. He bought one of his Keep Hammering hats.
Yeah, you know, and that's kind of like the tip I've always been on, is like that David Goggins, like Cameron Haynes, of quit chasing pleasure all the time, of like, oh, I'm going to do DMT and figure out life's problems. You know, if I could just get high all the time, I would just be cool. It's like, no, stress and problems follow you wherever. It's like, you have to learn to embrace it and not just like run away with it. And like, I just want the pursuit of happiness, is what I always said when I first came out to Portland. And it's like, what is that? It's like, because even when you have a bunch of shit you've always wanted, it's always still kind of empty, or some other stress is going on. It's never perfect. All the shit that, you know, they want you to want is all hollow, you know. And it's like, that's where just embrace the grind. And if there's a true pleasure and happiness, you know, like, it'll mean more to you, you know, like if you're used to the dirt, like just living in the grind all the time, and you're not just chasing happiness. Because I was chasing shit. I don't want to be a carpenter. I don't want to be a this or that. Like, I'll just go do something else, trying to avoid it. And it's like, yeah, you should just embrace it. The more you embrace it and can just appreciate the good times when they're there, instead of just trying to find them, spend all your money saying, I deserve this, I just need to relax or whatever. It's like, that's kind of bitch shit, really. You know, like, you should be just grinding and going harder. Like, diamonds are made under pressure, right? Like, you have to, if you grow, you know, it's coming from pressure and like stress and all that. And it's like, if you're not, then you're dying. If you're not growing, you're dying, like type thing. And you should want that pressure to level up and like know how to deal with challenges. And Cameron Haynes, David Goggins, you ever heard of Wes Watson? He's a fitness guy out of San Diego. He was like a prison dude. He was like some white Aryan Brotherhood type prison gang. So he does all these prison workouts, but now he's like reformed and all about positivity. But yeah, he did like a workout plan that I was all about.
I'm going to take a piss real quick and get a little bit more water.
I got like 5 more minutes before I got to get out. I got a client coming to pick up a dog, so we'll probably wrap up here soon. But
okay, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's good hearing from you again. It's been a while. It's good to catch up. That was fun kicking it with you.
Yeah, man. I enjoyed hearing your perspectives on different things, man. I think that was some real shit that you spoke about today, man.
Yeah, I got a feeling I come off as crazy. I feel like I'm crazy, like while I'm saying it, and that it's like you're going too fast, like in all over the place. But hopefully everybody can kind of just get the sentiment out of it or whatever, of just what I was going with. And this was more about me and you kicking it than it was anything, you know, too much. I'm not trying to convince anybody or sell anybody on anything. It's like, I'm just kicking it with one of my best friends from grade school, you know, who I haven't seen in like 8 years now.
You know who I think would enjoy this episode right here, man? Our old friend Nathan Miller. Do you ever keep up with him?
Yeah, Cheeks Badeeks. Yeah, a couple times a year I hear with them. He represented like another paradigm shift in life. He was always one of my best friends along the way, where, you know, going into like kind of the dark side of like high school, like he was right there with me. He introduced me to a lot of people along the way. He was like my in at Collinsville High School. Was I knew him, I was his friend, and he seemed to know everybody. And yeah, I haven't seen him in a while. I got my son Memphis baptized at Holy Cross a couple years ago, and he came out for that. And I got to see him real fast. Every time I come in town, though, there's just a lot of people, and you don't get to just sit and kick it with anybody, because I got to go see my mom. There's usually a lot going on, and I don't come in very often, and everybody wants to see like the babies and all that. So
what about Nick Delaney? How's he doing?
Yeah, he's probably the one I keep up with the most. I probably talk to him. We'll like go off for like an hour or two on the phone, kind of like this, like once a month, once every couple months. But another synchronicity, is just with him is because me and him were baptized on the same day at the same service, like together. And like we didn't even, it was just randomly that was happened, where he's always been, like that best friend from the get-go, where he went to Metro with me when everybody else went to like Collinsville. He went to Metro. Like he was supposed to join the Army when I joined the Army, but like he was always around for all that. And so I was like the best man in his wedding and all that. He's the one I probably kept the most in touch with, is him out of everybody from back home.
Where's he at these days?
In Springfield, Missouri. Yep. He works for like some fire suppression place, like fire alarms or something like that, and his wife's a vet. I've been trying to get him to come out to Portland because she's a vet tech and she's all into like dogs and everything. I'm like, hey, I got dogs, like come out and work, we can do this, together. But he's always been more responsible, where I've always been like that jump in head first, at the deep end and see what happens. And he's kind of been more of I need a good strategy before I just go do some dumb shit, where mine has always just been on some ignorance of head first. We'll see where we land. If nothing else, I'm in Portland. It can't be that bad.
I fuck with that mentality, man.
My mentality or his mentality?
Yours.
It has its ups and downs. But it's like, if you do it, if you're just going to go jump off the deep end and like go somewhere and do something, you got to really be focused, like they say, like you can't be some geek off the street. Like you got to really fucking focus and want it and be down, like to be tested for how bad do you want it. And you got to kind of be clever to make all this shit, because most of the time everything's working against you. Like there's always something that makes you not be able to do what you want to do. And you got to kind of figure it out and just really want it. But, it's a lot of ignorance involved, and you got to have like be ready for disappointment and all that, where there's a safer ride of life that's not a bad thing to do. I see it and I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a job with benefits, like in a 401k and all that. But then like this happened, Corona happens, and it's like, oh, well, nobody's safe, huh? Like everybody's vulnerable to the economy. But yeah, there's plenty of times doing your own thing. You're like, yeah, the security of just a 9-to-5 job, and how much you're going to make that month. It's got its benefits, and I'm not knocking it at all, but it's never really been my style. Like I've always been kind of doing something different, but it's got its ups and downs. It's definitely no walk in the park. There's been plenty of like disappointment along the way, but it's been a fun ride. I got nothing to complain about. Like, and I look back at when me and you were little kids, and like now look at me now, like if I would have saw this crystal ball, I wouldn't be bummed out. It's like, oh, you live on a big farm with, a hot wife and 2 cute kids and some wolf dogs, like, and you're out growing weed. Like that ain't so bad. Like there's worse lives. At least I ain't in jail, like type thing. It would have been the thing I was most happy about if I saw this crystal ball. But
that's what's up, man. I know you got to get going. I feel like you dropped a lot of knowledge on the people today, man, and you spoke from the heart. You spoke some real shit, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, it's always good to hear from you. I'll come on here and do this again. I could be like your Joey Diaz or somebody like that, one of those reoccurring guests who we stay in touch, because this is a cool platform. It's cool we can do this, That's probably my favorite part of this era of life, is communication and keeping up with people's easy. We should take advantage of it more. And yeah, I got all the equipment, and I always got time with a little bit of schedule. I make my own schedule, so I can always put you in there. So I should definitely do it again sometime. But
I appreciate that. Do you want to give a shout out to anybody? Maybe we can have some more people that we know from the past get on here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's so many people back home. I was trying not to like name drop too many people just because it's like when I was listening to Alex Moore's, like I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're gonna mention me, like because we were talking about Adam Moore's house. I was over there all the time, and I didn't want to drag people on and be like, oh, he didn't even say my name anyways, because there's so many, like I guess Matt Heatherly, he's one who got a shout out. But yeah, I don't keep up that much with too many people back home. But I still got all love for that little group. Jeremiah Cook, he came out here one time to visit. He's one of the people. Nick Delaney, he's been out here like 6 or 7 times. Jonesy used to work with him at Papa John's. He's come out here before. Garrett Hendry, do you remember him? He went to Good Shepherd. He was a year older than us. He ended up being like my best friend we joined the Army together, like out of high school. We were like became best friends. So I still keep up with him here and there. He's the one whose house I left when I got hit by the car. It was me and him were there for all that. And yeah, I keep up with him, but I was wondering, I wonder who would even see this from back home. I was like, are your parents going to see this? Like, is it, what group is it? Cause I kind of figure I'd be talking about DMT and drugs and shit like that too. But
yeah, I was going to say, if there's anything that like you said that you don't want me to post, like just let me know.
I don't care. Like I said, I'm a grown up now where it's like, yeah, you can judge if you want. I am where I am. Like, I don't have a boss, like I'm the parent you would tell on now. Like there's nobody to tell on me too. So I don't really care. And so, yeah, I don't really mind, but okay. Yeah, I gotta head out now. So
yeah, who knows? Like maybe if like one of our conversation points that we talked about ever goes viral, like it can bring some business to your place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, you could plug the dog, but I'm so busy. Like, I don't need business. There's more dogs that need training than like I have time. It's just constant. When I first started my business like 3 years ago, this is what I dreamed of, was like, oh, you would just be so busy, a wait list, but it's hard to keep up with it. Now it's almost like when I get the email or phone call, I'm just like, oh, another one. Like, how am I going to keep up with this? I need employees and all that, but it's a high stakes industry. I don't like giving trust in people I don't know with other people's animals and stuff. That's how careers get ruined, is you work your reputation up and then some fucking idiot does something stupid and ruins everything you worked for. So I like keeping it just me. But yeah, I don't really even need the business. My wife, Carly Kingston, she's an actress. She's got the YouTube or a YouTube page and an Instagram page. You can follow her and her little career. Hot Bikini Beans was the web series she did. It's a comedy thing that was pretty funny, but yeah, that's about it. I got nothing to plug for me. I got enough going on as it is.
Right on. I appreciate your time, Aaron. Good
to hear from you. Yeah. I'll catch up with you soon. Send me a copy of this. I want to hear it whenever you get it, or put it online and I'll check it out.
I enjoyed it, man.
Keep up the good work, man. You're a good interviewer. It's always fun to see you. I'm glad we got to finally smoke together. So yeah, I'll catch you. Stay in touch. We could do this again sometime.
Yeah, man. Anytime you want to do it again, let me know. I'll do the same.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Take care, Aaron. I appreciate your time, man.
Yep. You too.
All right. Later, man.
This concludes our danse macabre.